Hi, everyone, and welcome to GLF Live, and happy Earth Day. Today is the annual global holiday to celebrate our Earth, and in honor, this GLF Live is taking a bit of a different perspective and looking at our planet from outer space, and looking at how this vantage point can help us better protect and restore the degraded parts of our global home. So in concrete terms, this way of monitoring our Earth comes from satellites, and there are currently about 3,000 satellites in orbit around our planet. And an increasing number of these are used to gather data on landscapes and the environment and feed that data into responses to climate change. So I'm really excited about this conversation. It's such a fascinating topic and such a current topic as this technology is being increasingly developed. And we have with us here Dr. Kenneth Mubea, who is the User Engagement Manager for Digital Earth Africa, which is a major initiative that takes data from satellites and digests it in a way so that it can be readily used by researchers, policymakers, and a number of other people working on sustainable development in Africa. So Dr. Mubea is a true expert in this field. He's worked for initiatives by NASA and Google and the UN Foundation and many others. And now he's with this incredible platform, Digital Earth Africa. So thank you so much for joining us from Nairobi. I'm really excited to hear from you. And I would like to start with the big picture perspective. There seems to be a big boom right now in satellite technology development and how that's used to look at landscapes and map landscapes. Why is there this big boom happening in this technological field at the moment?
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for this opportunity to talk more about Digital Earth Africa. So to get us started is that there's been a boom in Earth observation, mostly like in the developing countries like in Africa, because the governments embraced this technology in support of their national development agendas. So looking at 10 or 20 years ago, things were a little bit different. We had to wait for many hours to get this data. Even some governments had to look for flying aircrafts. Coupled with that with costs, they have embraced the new platforms, new technology, like what now we are offering, where it's analysis-ready data to help in addressing many national development agendas, including agriculture, water, and everything natural resource management.
Mm-hmm. And could you briefly describe what it is that Digital Earth Africa does? I know I touched on it in the intro, but if you could give us a bit more of a bigger perspective on your work.
Digital Earth Africa is providing a routine, reliable operational service, which means we are providing analysis-ready data to help policymakers in Africa, from the government, scientists, private sector, civil society, to address various issues, and mostly that of sustainable development for the future. So we are providing an ecosystem where everyone is welcome on board, working together as a community, because we value that multi-stakeholder approach, working together to share data. Also, what we're providing, like, for example, developing water observation from space to help Africa, looking at areas where there's been water and where there's not been water, has been a very good product that we've developed with various partners, including validation. We're also working on a food crop mask to help in agriculture and food security. This has been well received, and working about 6-7 partners in Africa to make sure we get the various data for validation so that no one in Africa is left behind.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And something that's really interesting about Digital Earth Africa is that it links, or it takes satellite data and then it filters it through the lens of the different sustainable development goals. So it's tying Earth observation data directly to certain goals. And you mentioned water, which links directly to SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation. And you've made this incredible water monitoring tool that shows the state of water resources across the continent at any given time. So how are you seeing this play out when you amass these mass amounts of data, really high quality data, linked directly to the SDGs? What's the impact of that you're seeing?
To answer this question is first to appreciate the work which is done by the national statistics offices, like in Africa, where if we've met with various stakeholders before, 2 years, 3 years ago, they told us they had a gap in data, and in response, we were thinking about these water observation from space, which was generated using analysis-ready data from Landsat. So looking at this data, which is like an aggregation of 6-7 years, we've been able to share with some of these statistics offices and also various champions, data champions in the various areas, and they have seen they could use this to report on SDG 6, especially the one on 661 on the water extent. And we had an interaction with the Tanzania National Bureau of Statistics, where they actually used it for addressing changes in Lake Sulunga, just a few miles or kilometers from Dodoma. And this was very interesting because 2 or 3 times there were incidences of floods and drought. And the colleagues from the National Bureau of Statistics communicating this to the policymakers, they could not really believe that was so. So we generated this animation from the water observation from space, and they went on a dissemination workshop even with the politicians, so they could actually see and share this also with the communities, and the communities could actually validate these times during the year there was some drought, and these times there were flood and they were displaced. So this is what we are looking at, that we're able to empower the people who really critically need this data, to work with the policy makers to give action, and also not leave the community behind, because the community also has this local knowledge, which is very useful for validation, and also make sure whatever we provide is well accepted across board.
Mm-hmm. And who is exactly your audience? You're creating these ways of digesting the data so that it's usable and understandable to people that aren't necessarily experts in reading satellite data. Does it go all the way down to local communities and up to policymakers, or who are you targeting with these data sets?
Digital Earth Africa is open to all as part of our equity and diversity strategy, JDSI. And with that approach, first we start with the governments, because these are the ones who really need this tool for decision making. We are looking at ministries, departments, and agencies. We're also looking at the civil society, who work in hand with the government, and also the researchers. And this has been like a level of users, and having the government on board as an enabler is very important whenever we have any interaction or we generate any product that we have their buy-in. Then we also have the buy-in from the government and the researchers and the civil society, so that we are looking at a situation where we've worked, for example, with a conservancy somewhere in northern Kenya, providing the service for mapping the conservancies where they need to see the pasture over time series data, and also the variability of water over time. And this has meant the conservancy works closely with the government, so that the government is able to convene meetings on the ground, and also working also with the journalists to inform them actually what is happening. So it means we are looking across board, where we actually able to communicate our work according to the forum or the persons. So for example, for the government, we're able to generate some charts and maps. They could see, oh, this is actually the position of the conservancy, and we need to move the animals to a certain area so that we have peace and security. So at least there was a buy-in from government, and also from the community. They were able to be displayed some maps, and even shown on the laptop, or even on a big screen, or even a projector, that this is how the situation is. And also working with them to generate some maps, just using freehand on how they want things to be done. So the buy-in is more going to the level of every user, and actually we are leaving no one behind on this spirit of SDGs.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible and really empowering to be able to give people that level of data. The other hand side of that, though, is that it creates a lot of transparency about what's happening in countries. Is there any pushback from governments about this level of data when they can't hide from what's happening in their landscapes?
I think over time, the governments in Africa have embraced the technology and also Earth observation as a way of making sure the communities coexist. So for the example of the conservancies, the government had issues every time. Whenever we have a drought, the communities will move from their conservancy and invade other private land. So this was a problem every year in the last 10 years. So giving the government an idea that actually this technology can help them to better plan grazing plans, and also to organize communities in conservancies has been a very good step. And working with the various champions like the conservancy, local leaders who are champions, and also the academia who are doing actually very good work, and also not leaving out the journalists who are able to communicate it very well to the various users. So we are looking at a situation where we provide this big service and make sure we're able to go to the level of even the local person on the ground, where it can even be translated to the local language. So that is it can be a task. It takes time, but we're embracing the diversity in every work we are doing.
Mm-hmm. You never really think about satellite data as a means for peacekeeping, but that's exactly what's happening, which is really impressive. You mentioned drought, and I'm wondering if there are other examples that the satellite data has been used to respond to immediate disasters and immediate crises rather than being fed into long-term policy, but how is it used in the immediate when things happen?
In the immediate kinds of disasters, first I was thinking about the drought, which I was addressing in terms of the conservancies we have, in terms of peace and security with the communities and the persons. Then also we are looking about floods. For example, last year, September, we had some floods in some lakes, like in the Rift Valley lakes, like Lake Baringo, and working closely with the Regional Center for Mapping for Resources for Development based in Kenya, where they have member states and they provide advisory services to governments. They were working with the National Development Management Authority, where they actually used this tool to show the scenario, and having that buy-in from a National Development Management Authority that you can actually use your tool, or they can actually even listen to you, was very nice, because they could provide critical services on the ground, communities who've been displaced, and more so to provide a buffer zone of where communities actually should avoid some of these areas if possible, which can be a very big task, but once the government is leading, people will listen.
Mm-hmm. What does satellite imagery not show? Like if a forest is being newly planted as part of a restoration process and the seedlings are very young, satellite data might not pick that up. Where does this technology need to go? How does it need to advance to capture more?
Looking at the service we provide in Digital Earth Africa, we are providing continental data from the Landsat and the Sentinel, like the Sentinel-2 at 10 meters, which the revisit time might be 5 or 10 days every 2 or even 4 times in a month. Then, as you mentioned, new growth or new landscapes, it means there's need for other additional sources. For example, now with the spirit of the new technology like the drones, we've seen agencies like the Kenya Forest and the Tanzania National Forest embracing the use of drones to look at their restoration programs and monitoring them, because then with the seedlings, you have to protect them and make sure the areas are really conserved as much as you do the fencing, and they cannot cover a big ground just over time. So they have had these grants from various governments to have drone data, and at some point we are looking at opportunities where our service is interoperable and they can actually load some of the data sets on our platform to do just a comparison. So looking at embracing technology as it comes, and the governments in Africa now are embracing the drones as the various initiatives. For example, you can see there's a movement of flying labs in every country. There's Senegal, there's Tanzania, and there's Kenya, and there are some regulations of which everyone is following. And even remember 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing my research in University of Bonn, we had to go with a drone somewhere in Tanzania, get a permit. Now things are a little much more clearer. You can even apply for a permit online. So we are very grateful for the governments in Africa to really embrace this, and also following their guidelines whenever required, because there are areas where they say you have to keep up because of some installations.
Mm-hmm. When did governments in Africa begin to embrace this technology?
Maybe I think it has been there for some time. It's just that it was not civilian based, so it was more on the military side in terms of surveillance. But now with time and more activists, thanks to the civil society movement, bringing the awareness, restoration programs, also the funding from various countries, some of the agencies which are like government-led, but more open, like the forest agencies, water agencies. They have really embraced the use of the drones for monitoring programs. Then also with our satellite imageries, way above, captured way above, we have the problem of cloud cover. So using the drones, you're able to move down closer. Even thinking of a scenario where we had colleagues in Senegal working together with the government and the Senegal Flying Labs to provide a service which was funded by one of the donor agencies. So there's that embracement over time that if we do it for the management of natural resources, it's a proper tool to be used.
Mm-hmm. You've been talking a lot about drones. Could you give us a brief overview of when are the best situations to use satellite data versus drone, and how do the two pair together?
Initially, I think of drones can be very expensive, and over time they become a little bit cheaper. But then I'm looking at a data ecosystem where, like, you use the analysis-ready continental data, like from what we have in DE Africa, and also from our colleagues from European Space Agency and NASA. So if you have like a Landsat at 30-meter level, you can get more historical information up to 1972 using the Landsat 5, which drone might not have. Then also we are looking at the Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2, like the Sentinel-2 program, which has been like 3-4 years. 3-4 years, 6 years ago, I remember when we like launched from 2014. Then also we had the Sentinel-1 at radar, which is like a complementarity. So using the other free open satellite data available, drones are actually looked at like a complementary. So like when you really need to narrow down to like a precision farming, precision agriculture. So like if I have a farm where I've tried to use Sentinel-2 to provide an assessment, but then I want to have something within a 10 by meter, like seedlings, then you can embrace a drone. And also drones over time have become a little bit cheaper because of various agreements, even the softwares for processing. So I believe with time and now with this era of internet technology, things are becoming a bit more easier to the hands of the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And this field is growing so quickly, which leads into another one of my questions. The field of satellite development itself is really expanding really quickly. Like now there are these miniature satellites called CubeSats that you can hold in your hands. They're so small. You also have a new Landsat being developed at the moment, which will really take the technology to the next level. So the satellites themselves are really advancing. Are we keeping up with the data that they're able to provide? Like, are we able to find ways to analyze and disseminate their data? Are we keeping up with the pace of the technology?
Yeah, I think we are really trying, and also there's a challenge with some of the new satellites is that some of them are led by some governments who maybe are not very keen to share what they're doing. So what most governments are trying to do is to address the immediate situations like droughts and disasters, and providing a service on agriculture and food security. So it's more of they are trying to start small. So like in Africa, we have space agencies which have been set up, and they have launched some CubeSats, but with the help of foreign governments. So that means there's a challenge of what can be shown in terms of what is really required and not a surveillance service. So there's a balance between what we can provide for the better management of natural resources. So that is the topic at the moment. And also some of these countries will require some capacities to manage their own systems. So it's a system which is taking time, and it's relying more on the leadership of these various countries and the commitments. So government commitment is a very good driving force once you have the political will.
Mm-hmm. And where are you seeing this political will coming about most readily within the continent of Africa and beyond?
At the moment, I wouldn't say the specific countries, but it has been seen across board. Like the last 10 years, we had something on the space secretariats for each country. And within the last 5 years, now it was more clear we have a space agencies. Like now we have at least 5 to 10, which you can mention from different countries. Kenya, there's Ghana, there's Rwanda, there's Algeria, Tunisia, and there are like 4 10, and these are just some which have started, and they were based from the Ministry of Defense. So it means that over time now there are more civilians who are coming on board to give the extra talent and skill which is required to more address now the natural resources, because the focus of most governments now is mostly addressing the agriculture, food security, and the water. Those two topics are very crucial for any government to plan for its immediate 10 or 5 years, and also not rely mostly on these donor aids and etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your data is really crucial for planning around water and food and basic necessities. How does the work of Digital Earth Africa tie into the global community of satellite technology development? Are there other platforms similar to yours across the world? Do you work with other platforms? What's the global ecosystem?
The ecosystem has been there thanks to champions programs, and thanks also very much to the Sustainable Development Goals. So where I started 3 years ago, I was working with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which is under the UN Foundation, and they have been very instrumental in providing data for management of, for monitoring of SDGs. And in one of those programs, based on what was happening, like with the Open Data Cube, started which around 2017, Australia was able to develop its own Open Data Cube, which later became the Digital Earth Australia. So borrowed on that knowledge and what has been happening on that end, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and the Group of Earth Observation and colleagues from CEOS, this is the Committee of Earth Observation Satellites, namely Dr. Brian Kilo, the pioneers, and also some credits from Amazon Web Service. They were able to pilot an Africa Regional Data Cube for 5 countries, which was started in May 2018. So the service was to mostly provide the service to the National Statistics Office, whom we are very keen to support. They need the data for planning and working also with various actors and critical persons from agriculture, water, forest, etc. So based on that learning, this was able to provide the Digital Earth Africa concept to start around 2019, so that now it could be like now a scale up, and now working with various partners, including Geoscience Australia, the funding from the government of Australia, and the funding from Hampstead Start in the US, and also the goodwill of many governments to have something that is available for Africa to use. And we are trying to work closely with the African Union, also the Economic Commission in Africa. We are also working with at least 6 implementing partners in Africa. From Tunisia, we have a partner in Senegal, Nigeria, Kenya. This is the Regional Center for Mapping for East Development, and also we are working with the South African Space Agency, and also we are working to add more partners. So at least we move from the implementing partners to more countries, like the 54 countries, and we try to make sure everything is well utilized. So the Digital Earth Africa has been a success in that sense, that it borrowed the lessons learned from the Africa Regional Data Cube. And with that credit is that now we are giving other people in Latin America the opportunity to start like a Latin America Data Cube. So as we know right now, we have Mexico running its own data cube, thanks to the Mexico Statistics Office. We also have Brazil, run by the Forest Department. We also have Chile, and also the 3 or 4 countries in South America. And there has been some interest from Paraguay, as I can remember, and Peru. So it means from the lessons learned, they'll be able to talk to more like Amazon Web or Google Credits to make sure they have something they can operationalize. And also this has also given the chance for our colleagues from the Pacific. So there are guys in Vanuatu thinking about a Pacific Data Cube. So that is something which can happen. And then way back in Europe, there's a Swiss Data Cube. And I know the Austria Data Cube is there. And also others are coming up. So most countries are actually trying to pilot something, and they're actually learning from the Digital Earth Africa based on the learning also we've learned from Digital Earth Australia.
Mm-hmm. Before we go to questions from the audience, I do want to, thank you for giving that really global perspective and just showing how broadly this, or how widely this net is cast. And we'll get to some of those specific countries in just a moment. But first, for those who are listening and might not know what an open data cube is, could you briefly just describe that and also speak to the importance of keeping this data open?
So the open data cube technology is a way of structuring the analysis ready data. So when I talk about also the analysis ready data is just the data from the open satellite systems, like the data from the US Geological Service, the Landsat, the data from the European Space Agency Sentinel-1 and 2, then processing this data into analysis format, which has been agreed upon thanks to the Committee of Earth Observation Satellites. They are normally called the COs. So they have come up with a metadata for the processing of data. So when we talk about a normal person will have to download the data from one of these services and use their typical remote sensing software, which might cost you some money. But if you have a service which has already looked at this and provided the analysis ready data, and also the best part about this is that this initiative, like the Africa, has made our colleagues like from the US Geological Service, they have actually thought and they are putting their data as collection 2 data or analysis ready data on the Amazon web so that it will be easier for everybody who's coming on board. And this will even give a chance for other Latin data cube or Pacific. So the future is quite bright. So whenever we have these open data cubes that you can connect to your data, which is analysis ready processed, and you have the option of running it offline in a big server room, like what they do in Mexico. And also you have the option of talking with the cloud providers, like now with the good partnership we have with Amazon. They have hosted our data. They have moved the data from Oregon in the US to Cape Town in South Africa. So it's closer to guys in Africa. So there's a big buy-in from cloud providers seeing the value of how they can support this big data for governments. And the key message is the natural resource management for future development.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that description. You mentioned before, and you mentioned just now as well, that Latin America is soon to start implementing some of this technology as well. And judging by how you've seen the data used and translated into African landscapes, what do you think can happen in Latin America with this technology applied and used correctly? How can it directly help us save places like the Amazon and some of these crucial ecosystems?
This will be a huge success because then we'll avoid the reinventing of the wheel, because there are many organizations, NASA, everyone is working there. Every development agency is trying to work in South America. So if you have this big Latin data cube and we have analysis ready data for the continent and providing historical data like 30, 35 years, adding more data from the Sentinel-1 and 2, you'll be able to do a very big assessment of the Amazon, save the Amazon time, analysis, save researchers also time, a lot of fieldwork they have to go and look for data. So you'll be looking at a whole landscape where we are looking at Latin America. You have a product for water observation from space, showing the historical information about the water in the continent, Latin America, showing agriculture and food security, working with various partners, these various many countries, speaking Spanish, and our colleagues who speak Portuguese, like in Brazil. So there's a lot of cultural boundaries to look at. So the buy-in is more on the end game that you're providing a routine service that will be there for a long time for management of the natural resources. And also, if you read, as you know about Latin America, we have the resources shared, like a river from Brazil to Argentina. So there's that good will that if you have something which is already analyzed and the buy-in from the statistical agencies, this will be a very huge success for management of cross-boundary resources and also identifying champions to work with. I would think more of the National Statistics Office. They're a very good key to work with, and it will help in the institutionalization of the digital earth Latin America, for example, that everyone is working together. You bring in Google, you bring in Amazon, you bring in everybody, and also even the commercial providers will be like, wow, they can see how they can add value because it's a system is already working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point about bringing in more private businesses, which I'm sure helps disseminate it to the public a whole lot better as well. One question before we go to questions from the audience. In 10 years, and this is a large perspective question, but in 10 years from now, how do you hope to see this data being used? How do you hope to see this data translate into direct action on climate change globally?
Looking at 5 to 10 years, I'm thinking of the champions who we really trained like now, who have gone through the Africa training materials. We are looking at the interactions that you've made and working closely with these people in governments that will be the decision makers in the near future. So there'll be more buying, there'll be more transparency, there'll be more achievements in terms of the use cases published. We'll be able to work with journalists, we'll be able to bring everybody on board, better planning of resources, and also I'm seeing a possibility of bringing in private companies who can add value where it's required.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I hope that's achieved. So we have a question from one of our listeners, Feha, and she is asking, do extractive industries welcome scrutiny? Scrutiny coming from the data of these satellites. Can this data help to improve human rights for communities who are impacted by natural resource exploitation, for example, forest mining?
I think this is a very good question. As Digital Earth Africa, we are working with various countries. Like, for example, we've developed a notebook which addresses the impacts of mining. So we're engaging very much with the Ghana Statistical Service who were able to connect us with the Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana. And we were able to provide some assessments. And I think a year or two ago, we were able even to do an activity with some journalists where we brought them to the ground to show them how things have changed. And we were able to empower the people who are the champions of the rights and communication. And the government was very happy to see that even we bring people from outside and also build the capacity of the local people, and also how you can actually engage like forum. So we even discovered that as much as we had the tool, the people from the Environmental Protection Agency were not empowered enough to know what they really require, because they already even had a drone. So they were like, wow, we capture really good images with a drone. Actually, we can compare analysis with what you guys have, and we can get some more historical information, because drone is just like instant.
Thank you. Another question we have was in regards to something you said closer to the beginning about translating this data even into local languages. What is the process of taking this data and getting it into the hands of local communities? And what does it look like to them?
I think, as they say, change takes time. Also, with the kind of work we are doing, it takes some time to engage. So I was thinking more closely with example with the Conservancy. We are trying to, and this is the end game, that we're able to democratize what is happening within a specific conservancy or within a specific community, and also bringing in journalists to be more aware of what is happening locally, because now the journalists are the ones who are able to communicate well with the communities. So it means even the findings they get, even taking through them, some of the results, they can actually write them in a way which is understandable by the communities. So local language. Also, we are trying to see how we can bring in international media so that this particular article is well presented. So there were some efforts on that, and some results will be within like, since today it's Earth Day, I think tomorrow we'll have something like a feature somewhere which is nice to report or to add value to this conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. We have another question. If someone would be interested in joining one of your projects to access this data, where should they start?
Yes, the data we have like on our webpage, the Digital Earth Africa, is free and open to use. I can even paste the link on this particular chat. So the training material is free, and also we have weekly sessions every Wednesday at 11 a.m. GMT 0 time to have more users connect with us, or even new persons to connect with us, to give them to give us feedback and their concerns, and also they can let us know where they are stuck, so that we can actually see how we can make our materials much better in terms of communication with them.
Thank you. That's very accessible, and that's wonderful that you guys make yourselves that open. One last question, and something that you've touched on a few times as well, is the role of the private sector in satellite data and how it's used and disseminated around the world. So what is the role of places like Google and Amazon and other companies starting to invest more into this technology?
I think these companies are seeing the values of like supporting the continent Africa, because then there's a lot we need to digitize. So one of them is the Earth observation data. Some of these companies, as you mentioned, they're providing very critical service for governments in terms of backup of data. So they're really coming at the right time we need them. Even now with the pandemic, everyone is working from home. So most guys in these government ministries want to access their files from a server. So this is possible with these companies you mentioned. So there's a lot of benefits we are seeing. Even with Google, we saw they had brought a service for internet connectivity in Africa. So, and also this adds value for the Africa because now guys can connect with us. So this is an ecosystem that now we are moving beyond the comfort zone of making profit to what we can do for humanity. And I think that's how you'll be more blessed.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful note to end on. Is there anything else you would like to share or anything else you would like to say to wrap up this conversation?
Mine is to thank you very much for this forum that you've created, and I wish it could be more often so that we can reach out to more guys in the continent and even in other countries, because I could see there's someone from Georgia. So this is very nice that we can actually share what lessons we have, or even them who are calling in from different countries, they can tell us what is happening on their side so that we can actually see how the developments are going. And even next time we'll be reporting about the successes that we've achieved.
Wonderful. Well, I also hope that we'll be able to convene a bit more. It's such incredible work that you're doing. And thank you so much for joining us. It was so great to hear everything that you had to share. And it was perfect for Earth Day. So thank you everyone for joining. Happy Earth Day. And we'll see you next time on GLF 5.
Happy Earth Day.